Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Freda never wanted to be like her older sister, Angela. Where Angela was calm, thoughtful, and modest, Freda was a whirlwind, loud, rebellious, and desperate to escape their small home where the scent of kerosene stoves and unspoken pain filled the air. Their widowed mother, Peace, often said, "Angela is the daughter every mother dreams of. You, Freda, you're fire without control." But Freda didn't care. At 16, she already saw rules as shackles. She spent more nights out than in, staying with older friends, some dangerous, others just lost like her. She wanted to live, to be free, to forget how their father had died suddenly, and how their mother had changed from a vibrant woman into a tired shell who only spoke in sighs. Angela often stayed up late waiting for her, only to open the door and see Freda stumble in reeking of sweat, smoke, and mistakes. "You'll burn yourself," Angela would whisper. "Then maybe I'll finally feel something," Freda would mutter back. It was during one of those wild months that Freda met Chuka, older, fast-talking, charming, and entirely wrong. He picked her up on his motorbike like she was a prize and fed her sweet promises laced with poison. "You're not like other girls," he'd whisper in the dark. "You're dangerous. I like that." At first, Freda felt like a queen basking in attention. But when she missed her period and panic clawed its way through her gut, Chuka was nowhere to be found. His number stopped ringing. His bike never came again. At first, she kept it from everyone. She masked her growing belly in baggy clothes and silence. But Angela noticed. She always noticed. One night, as Freda sat on the porch, clutching her abdomen in silent tears, Angela knelt beside her. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Freda nodded without looking up. "Does Mama know?" Angela asked softly. "No," Freda whispered, "and she can't." "Please, Angela, I don't know what to do." That was the first night Freda didn't sleep alone. Angela held her as she wept, whispering, "We'll find a way. I won't let you go through this alone." Freda didn't know then, but Angela meant every word, even if it meant carrying a secret that would change all their lives. Freda's shame clung to her like sweat on a humid afternoon. The farther her pregnancy progressed, the more she withdrew from the world that once thrilled her. Gone were the late nights and impulsive getaways. Now she moved with caution, sneaking to a nearby midwife under Angela's watchful coordination. Their mother, Peace, assumed Freda had fallen into a depressive slump and only praised Angela for taming that wild spirit, finally. But within the walls of Angela's small room, walls decorated with quotes about grace and stillness, Freda lay on her back, clutching her belly, asking questions she didn't really want answered. What if he looks like me? What if he asks one day who I am? Angela often remained quiet. One evening, Freda stared at the ceiling and whispered, "I wish I could rewind everything. Maybe I wouldn't have gone to that stupid street party." Angela only replied, "You can't go back, Freda. But we can go forward. We'll just move differently." When the time came, labor tore through Freda like waves crashing against a rocky cliff, loud, unforgiving, and without mercy. She screamed into a pillow in the cramped back room of a retired nurse who'd agreed to keep things quiet. Angela held her hand throughout, whispering encouragement even as her own hands trembled. "You're doing well. Just breathe. Breathe with me." Hours passed until finally, the room filled with the tiny wail of new life. Freda turned her face to the wall and refused to look. "I can't. I just can't," she choked out. Angela, her eyes red-rimmed but steady, wrapped the baby boy in a soft cotton cloth. "He's beautiful, Freda," she said. "He has your mouth. Don't tell me that." Freda shouted, covering her ears. "Don't make this harder." That night, as the baby slept between them, Freda made the decision she'd been avoiding. "Raise him," she said in a raw whisper. Tell him you're his mother. I can't be what he needs. I'll ruin him like I ruin everything." Angela didn't argue. She just nodded with tears in her eyes, kissed Freda's forehead, and whispered, "Then he's mine now." Angela moved with the quiet purpose of someone determined to protect more than her own peace. She returned home with the baby wrapped close to her chest, telling their mother that he was the son of an old friend who had died in childbirth. Peace, exhausted by the world and softened by grief, accepted the story without protest. Poor thing, she said, brushing her fingers over the baby's dark curls. So many babies left motherless in this wicked world. Freda, true to her word, avoided the baby like a secret. She stopped holding him. She avoided his cries. She even began applying for housekeeping jobs far from town. Angela named him Jaden. And from the moment he gripped her finger in his tiny hand, her heart rewrote itself. She memorized every sound he made, sang him to sleep, and carried him on her back even when her spine ached. To the world, she was his mother. To Jaden, she was his world. But nights were heavy. There were moments when Angela sat alone, staring at her sleeping nephew, now son, and battled with guilt. Was it right to keep the truth from him? Could she really erase the woman who had birthed him? "You'll thank me one day," she'd whisper, kissing his tiny knuckles. "You'll never feel unwanted, I promise." Meanwhile, Freda drifted further into silence. She took a cleaning job in a hotel 2 towns away and left home before sunrise each day, coming back after dark. Her relationship with Angela grew tense, not from anger, but from a sadness they both carried and never named. "How is he?" Freda asked once, standing at the doorway. "Happy," Angela replied without looking up. "He sleeps with his fists in the air like he's ready to box the world." Freda forced a laugh that died before it reached her eyes. Just like his mama, I guess. But Angela didn't correct her. She wouldn't. That was the sacrifice. She would raise Jaden in light and bury the shadows in herself. Angela had never seen herself as someone a man like Francis would notice. He was polished, brilliant, and 10 years older, owning 2 estate firms and known for his discreet generosity in the community. They met during a town fundraiser where Angela, quiet and understated in her wine-colored dress, had come only to help with the children's booth. Francis had watched her from afar as she gently painted a butterfly on a little girl's hand, the way her eyes lit up with patience and focus. "You don't speak much, do you?" he asked when he finally introduced himself. "Not unless there's something worth saying," Angela replied with a soft smile. That was the beginning. He brought her books, she mentioned in passing. She sent him quotes written on scraps of paper. He admired how she loved without needing attention. She admired how he listened with care. One evening, as they walked past an old church, Francis said, "I never imagined falling in love again." Angela, startled, turned to him. "Again?" He nodded. "My first wife died in a car crash. I thought my heart had no room left until you." Angela didn't answer for several seconds. The night breeze rustled her blouse, and her fingers trembled slightly. "I come with extra pieces," she said quietly. "A son, born not of my body but of my heart. And a sister who," Francis gently stopped her. "I don't need your perfect past. I only need your honest present." Her eyes stung with unshed tears. She had guarded Jaden fiercely, even from Joy. But Francis was different. He visited often, bringing little cars for Jaden and laughing at the toddler's questions like they were Shakespearean riddles. Jaden adored him in the way children do when they sense safety. After nearly a year of slow, tender courtship, Francis knelt in the park where Angela often took Jaden. "Will you marry me, Angela P. Socorro?" he asked. She hesitated, not because she didn't love him, but because her secrets hung around her like a second skin. "Yes," she finally said, breathless. "Yes, I will." And just like that, her quiet world opened into something terrifyingly beautiful. Angela's wedding to Francis was small, elegant, and deeply moving. She walked down the aisle, holding Jaden's hand. And when they reached the altar, Francis bent to shake the little boy's hand before lifting him into his arms and declaring, "We're a family now." Peace cried silently in the front row, touched by the grace of a new beginning. Freda was not there. She had sent a short text the night before that simply read, "I hope you find joy, Angie. I can't face it, but I'm praying for you." Angela didn't reply. She didn't have to. She carried Freda's pain like a shadow on her veil. In the months that followed, Angela moved into Francis's estate on the hill. Jaden now had his own room, a toy shelf that never seemed to run out of surprises, and a backyard with lemon trees and space to run wild. But Angela remained deeply intentional. She still rocked Jaden to sleep on the nights he had nightmares, still cooked his favorite moi moi with soft fish in the center, and still whispered, "You are so" wanted into his ear whenever the world felt too loud. Then, just when life began to feel stable, Angela's body betrayed her. It started with fatigue she couldn't shake. Then came the bleeding, the weight loss, and the quiet fear she buried behind smiles. One afternoon, after yet another round of hospital visits, Francis sat beside her on the edge of their bed, his hands cold against hers. "You're scaring me," he said quietly. Angela looked away, tears rising. "They say it's stage 4. It's in the lymph nodes." The silence between them was devastating. "But you're strong," Francis said eventually, gripping her tighter. "You've come through fire before. We'll fight this," Angela smiled faintly. "Some fires don't go out, love. Some just change the shape of who we leave behind." In her final months, Angela wrote letters, pages of love and memories addressed to Jaden, and one carefully folded envelope marked simply Freda. She hid them in the back of her jewelry box, behind an old photo of her and Freda as children. When she passed peacefully one morning, Jaden was curled beside her, his small hand resting on her still chest, unaware that the heartbeat he once heard every night was now silence. The days after Angela's passing settled like ash in the mansion, silent, gray, and hard to breathe through. Jaden didn't cry for days. He just sat on the window seat of his room, watching birds fly by as if they carried his mother's spirit in their wings. Francis tried his best. He prepared Jaden's breakfast himself, learned how to tie shoelaces, even though he hadn't done it in 20 years, and read bedtime stories with trembling effort. But nothing filled the quiet. Jaden became withdrawn. At school, he stopped raising his hand. At home, he talked only to the framed picture of Angela on his nightstand. "Mama, are you still watching me?" he'd whisper. "Are you still in my dreams?" And when no answer came, he'd curl up under his blanket and hold the last scarf she wore, the one that still smelled faintly of her hibiscus perfume. Francis often sat outside Jaden's room late into the night, listening, afraid to enter and more afraid to leave. It was a silence neither of them knew how to survive. Francis found himself attending grief counseling, not for himself, but for Jaden. "He's just 8, Francis said during one session. "How do I explain absence to a child who still calls for her in his sleep?" The counselor replied, "You don't explain it. You sit with it. Let him feel everything." Francis tried. He filled Jaden's weekends with walks in the park, puzzles, and museum visits. Still, the boy remained distant, his eyes too old for his face. One evening, Jaden looked up at him during dinner and asked, "Daddy, if Mama had a sister, would she look like her?" Francis paused, caught off guard. "Why do you ask that?" he said gently. Jaden shrugged. "I just wonder if someone else in the world still has her smile." The words stayed with Francis all night, wrapping around his thoughts like vines. He began wondering if seeing someone who looked like Angela might help Jaden heal. Perhaps a familiar face could ease the sharp edges of loss. It was this idea, innocent yet loaded, that would lead them to a restaurant one quiet evening. Neither father nor son knew that their lives were about to tangle with the past in the most unexpected way. The restaurant sat like a jewel box at the corner of Oyen Street, modern and understated, with soft lighting and polished floors that glowed under chandeliers. Francis had heard about it through a client who praised their grilled tilapia and suya-glazed wings. Wanting to do something different for Jaden, who hadn't smiled in days, he reserved a corner booth by the window. "You'll like it here," he said, tousling Jaden's hair as they stepped inside. Jaden nodded listlessly, holding onto his small notepad where he doodled trees and rooftops. The hostess who greeted them had a name tag that read Freda. She wore a navy blouse tucked neatly into black trousers, and her locks were tied up in a bun. But it wasn't her clothes or posture that stopped Francis cold. It was her face. He stared, breath caught in his throat. The resemblance was eerie. Her eyes, her cheekbones, even the way she tilted her head to listen. It was like looking at Angela again, 10 years younger. "Table for 2, Freda asked, her voice clear but warm. Francis nodded mutely. Jaden tugged on his sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, not taking his eyes off her. She looks like Mama." Freda blinked, clearly startled by the child's words. Her eyes flicked quickly from Francis to Jaden, then back again. "I'll take you to your seat," she said, voice tighter now. As she walked them to their table, Francis couldn't stop glancing at her. His thoughts raced. Could this be Angela's cousin? A stranger with the same genes? He knew Angela had a younger sister, but she'd never spoken of her in detail. She left a long time ago, Angela had once said softly when he asked. I don't even know where she is anymore. But now Francis wasn't so sure. And Jaden? Jaden kept staring at the hostess, his brows furrowed in quiet thought. She talks like Mama, he whispered. I felt it in my stomach when she smiled. The rest of dinner passed in near silence, each bite tasting like unanswered questions. When they left the restaurant, Francis couldn't help glancing back, just once. Freda had disappeared into the back. But something inside him knew this was no coincidence, not even close. As they stepped out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, Jaden stopped suddenly on the pavement and looked up at Francis with wide, searching eyes. Daddy, he said softly, gripping his father's hand. That hostess, she looks just like Mom. Didn't you see it? Francis froze mid-step. The honesty in Jaden's tone left no room for dismissal. What do you mean? Francis asked carefully, crouching to face him. Like how? Jaden frowned, struggling to explain the emotion tightening in his chest. Not just her face, he whispered. Her eyes, the way she talked. I felt something. Francis exhaled slowly, his heart heavy with a discomfort he couldn't place. Sometimes people remind us of those we've lost. It doesn't always mean something big. But Jaden wasn't convinced. I think it means something, he said, walking ahead. Francis followed silently, unsure how to explain that he, too, had noticed something he couldn't explain. That night, Francis couldn't sleep. He sat in his study with the lamp dimmed low, flipping through old photo albums. There was a picture of Angela as a teen, arms slung around a girl with messy locks and a mischievous grin. Freda. The name was scribbled faintly on the back. He hadn't thought of that girl in years. Angela had barely spoken about her sister, and when she did, it was with restraint, like opening a sealed wound. We don't talk anymore, she'd said once. Some distances aren't measured in miles. But if this woman, this hostess, was really Freda, then Jaden's words weren't just childhood curiosity. They were instinct. Francis leaned back and closed his eyes. He could still hear Jaden's voice echoing in the restaurant. She talks like Mama. The puzzle pieces were starting to shift. Not connect yet, but shift. And that shift made his chest tighten with the weight of something half buried. He hadn't expected to feel this unsettled. But the more he tried to ignore it, the more that hostess's voice replayed in his head, like a whisper waiting to finish a sentence Angela never had the chance to say. Francis returned to the restaurant 3 times in the next 2 weeks, alone. Each visit was brief, calculated, and quiet. He would sit in the same seat near the corner, order something minimal, a bottle of water, a bowl of fruit salad, and watch the hostess from afar. Freda moved gracefully, but there was a slight tension in her shoulders whenever she spotted him. She was no fool. On his 3rd visit, she approached his table directly, setting down his check with a steady hand. Sir, is everything all right? She asked, her voice polite but guarded. You've been here more times than some regulars. Francis gave a soft, non-threatening smile. Just like the atmosphere. It reminds me of someone I used to know. Freda gave a nod and turned to walk away, but Francis added, You ever been told you look like someone you left behind? She froze briefly, then kept walking without looking back. Francis watched her retreat with quiet suspicion. She was hiding something, that much he was sure of. Freda leaned against the wall in the staff corridor, her heart thudding in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a glass of water. That man, his eyes weren't just curious. They were knowing. He was digging for something, and Freda had learned to recognize the scent of someone unburying the past. You okay? One of the waiters asked as he passed. She nodded quickly. Yeah, just need air. She stepped out into the alley behind the kitchen, closing her eyes against the cold breeze. Couldn't be. Not him. Not now. She had kept her distance for years, had changed cities, jobs, even her name briefly, to avoid anything that tied her to that chapter of her life. And yet there he was, Angela's husband. The man who married the woman who raised her son. Her son, Freda's breath caught. She hadn't even seen Jaden's face clearly, but the moment she heard his voice, something deep in her chest had cracked. She had looked away quickly. But now there was no unseeing. "Please," she murmured to the wind, "don't let the past find me here." But it already had. Frida's apartment was modest, a two-room flat above a tailor's shop, filled with second-hand furniture and old books with curled pages. Her world was one of simplicity and routine. She rose early, watered her single potted fern, and cooked jollof rice on Sundays even when no one came over. She never dated seriously. Trust had become a language she forgot how to speak. Each night she journaled, not to preserve memories, but to organize the ones that refused to fade. The entries often began the same way. "Jaden, I hope you're happy." She didn't know what he looked like anymore, or how he laughed, or if he still slept on his stomach like he did as a baby. But she carried his name like a secret tattoo etched inside her ribs. When she passed a mother holding a child, her throat tightened. When she heard a boy call for mama, she turned instinctively, only to remember she wasn't allowed that title. That title had been given to Angela, deservedly so. After work one evening, she sat in bed staring at a worn envelope tucked into her Bible. It was the only thing Angela had sent her after taking Jaden, the sonogram picture, and a letter in Angela's graceful handwriting. "He's perfect. You don't have to be ashamed anymore. I will love him with all I have." Frida clutched the letter to her chest. "You always loved better than I did," she whispered. "But maybe I could have tried harder. Maybe I should have." She hadn't expected to see Francis again, especially not with Jaden. It was like life had dragged the curtain back without warning, revealing a stage she'd long abandoned. Her phone buzzed with a message from her manager. "You're on hostess duty again tomorrow. A client from last week specifically asked for you." Frida stared at the screen, a strange hollowness blooming in her chest. She knew who that client was. She knew what this meant. The past wasn't knocking, it had walked in, sat at her table, and ordered water. And now she'd have to decide whether to run again or finally sit across from her own consequences. Francis returned to the restaurant with quiet determination, this time without hesitation. He requested Frida directly, stating calmly to the server, "Tell the hostess I'd like to speak with her personally, just a minute of her time." Frida hesitated in the staff hallway, smoothing down her blouse and exhaling sharply. Her palms were damp. She walked out, composed but cautious, her smile practiced. "Welcome back, sir. I hear you asked for me." Francis stood up slowly. "Yes, I did." There was a long silence as their eyes locked. "You remind me of someone I once loved," he said at last. Frida's breath caught, but her tone stayed even. "That happens sometimes." Francis didn't sit. "You're Angela's sister, aren't you?" he asked. Her jaw tightened, and her gaze dropped for a moment. "I don't know who you mean." "Angela Peace Okoro," he clarified gently. "My wife, she died 6 years ago." Frida gave a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry for your loss." Then she walked away before her voice betrayed her. Back in the storage hallway, Frida braced herself against a shelf of glasses, trembling. Her legs felt hollow beneath her. Angela's name, spoken aloud by the man she'd avoided for years, hit her like a forgotten song. She thought she had prepared for this possibility, but hearing it unstitched her. Meanwhile, Francis sat down slowly, his mind buzzing. Her denial wasn't aggressive, it was frightened. That wasn't a stranger dodging a customer. That was someone running from recognition. He picked up his phone and opened an old folder where he had saved scanned photos from Angela's childhood. One in particular stood out now, two sisters under a mango tree, laughing with their arms thrown around each other. He compared the younger girl's smile to the woman who had just walked away. Identical. He looked down at the untouched drink before him. "What in the world are you hiding, Frida?" he muttered to himself. Across the restaurant, Frida stood in the staff locker room, staring at herself in the mirror. "You had no right to bring him here, Angie," she whispered shakily. "You promised you'd protect him. You promised you'd never let this find me again." Jaden sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, surrounded by crayons, sketch pencils, and sheets of paper. He had never been the talkative child in class, but he always had a way of capturing things he couldn't explain with words. His mother's hands, the way the sky looked on her last day, and now, the woman from the restaurant. Her face was burned into his memory. He couldn't forget it, no matter how hard he tried. "I know her somehow," he whispered aloud as he shaded her high cheekbones. But not like someone I met yesterday. Like someone who's always been around. Francis, walking past the slightly open door, paused when he heard his son's voice. He watched Jaden for a moment in silence, his heart thudding at the sight of the portrait. "Who's that?" he asked gently. Jaden looked up and shrugged. "The hostess from that place. Her smile feels like Mom's. It makes my chest feel warm and tight at the same time." Francis stepped inside and sat on the bed. "Do you think she reminds you of your mom because she looks like her? Or because you feel something deeper?" Jaden frowned and leaned his head on his knees. "I don't know, Daddy, but it's like when you remember a song you used to love, and you hear it again and just no." Francis said nothing, but he knew this was no childish whim. This boy had always been perceptive in ways even Angela used to marvel at. Jaden flipped through the other drawings he'd done in secret, variations of Freda's face, one smiling, one sad, and one where she looked like she was about to cry. "She feels like someone who left me behind," Jaden whispered. "But I don't hate her." Francis reached for the boy's hand. "If that woman is connected to you in any way, I promise you, son, we'll find out the truth. You deserve to know." Jaden nodded slowly, staring back at the drawing. "I think she knows me already," he said under his breath. Francis didn't ask what he meant. The boy's tone held too much certainty. And in his heart, Francis had already begun preparing for a truth that might change everything. The next morning, Francis drove to the quiet part of town where Peace, Angela, and Freda's mother lived in a small bungalow surrounded by hibiscus hedges and faded window curtains. It had been years since he last visited, and the moment she opened the door, 1,000 unsaid things passed silently between them. "Francis," Peace said, her voice trembling. "You came." He gave a soft nod. "I needed to talk to you. About something that's been bothering me. It's about Freda." At her daughter's name, Peace's face changed, tightened, then dropped. "Come in," she said quietly. Inside, she poured him a cup of lukewarm zobo and sat opposite him with folded hands. "What do you want to know?" she asked, though her eyes already carried dread. "Is she alive?" he asked. "Did she ever reconnect with Angela before she died?" Peace shifted uncomfortably. "Angela told me not to speak of Freda again. Said she needed distance. But yes, she's alive." Francis leaned forward. "And Jaden, does he? Is there something I don't know about his birth?" Peace's grip on her wrapper tightened. She avoided his eyes as she whispered, "Angela never had trouble bearing children. But when she suddenly appeared with a baby and said she was adopting a friend's orphaned child, I knew better. I didn't ask Francis. He chose peace over truth." His stomach sank. "So you're saying Jaden isn't hers biologically?" Peace finally looked up. "What I'm saying is, Angela raised that boy with everything she had. That's more real than any blood test." But Francis didn't respond. His thoughts were already racing. "Do you know where Freda is now?" he asked. Peace hesitated again. "She left this town a long time ago. But if what you've seen is true, then she's returned. And she's been hiding in plain sight." Francis stood slowly. The pieces were shifting again, and this time they were aligning into something undeniable. As he walked back to his car, his hands shook slightly on the steering wheel. If what Peace implied was true, then everything Angela had built, everything she'd chosen to bury, was about to surface. And Jaden's world might never be the same. That evening, Freda sat cross-legged on the carpeted floor of her apartment, a small, worn box open before her. It smelled faintly of dust and time, filled with folded baby clothes, a crocheted blue hat, and an old pacifier with tiny bite marks still visible. Her fingers trembled as she touched each item. They were all that remained of the few months she had with Jaden before she gave him away. She had kept the box tucked deep in her closet, too afraid to open it for years. But now, after seeing his face and hearing his voice, everything inside her was shifting. She pulled out a small card, Angela's handwriting, elegant and calm. "Freda, he's healthy. He smiled today. You did something good." Freda held the card to her chest and let herself cry for the first time in years without restraint. "I didn't deserve her," she whispered aloud. "She took everything broken about me and still found room to love what I couldn't keep." She sat there, rocking gently, whispering Jaden's name over and over like a prayer too long unsaid. Later that night, Freda found herself staring at her own reflection in the mirror, but it wasn't her face she was trying to understand. It was her heart. "You ran," she said to her reflection, voice low and rough. "You gave him away and promised not to look back. But here you are, looking, crumbling." She turned away, pacing the room. Part of her wanted to disappear again, change jobs, leave town, vanish into the rhythm of another forgotten life. But another part, quieter, more persistent, kept whispering that it was time. Time to stop hiding. Time to face what she gave up. And more than that, time to be honest. She reached for her phone and opened a blank message to Francis. Her thumb hovered over the screen before she deleted the draft. "No," she murmured. "Not yet. Not like this." She wasn't ready to explain, but something inside her had shifted. She placed the baby hat back into the box, folded it shut, and placed it on her bedside table instead of back in the closet. If her secret was finally catching up to her, then she needed to remember what she was running from, and what she might still be running toward. Jaden stood by the restaurant's glass entrance one Saturday morning, holding his sketch pad close to his chest. Francis had allowed him to come alone, with a promise from the manager to keep an eye on him, as a way to give the boy some independence and peace. "You sure you'll be okay?" Francis had asked in the car. "I just want to sketch, Daddy," Jaden replied softly. "It makes me feel like she's still here." Inside, Freda's eyes widened slightly when she saw him approach. "Hey," she greeted, kneeling to meet his gaze. "You came back," Jaden smiled shyly. "I wanted to draw the place again, and maybe talk to you, if that's okay?" Freda swallowed hard but nodded. "Of course it's okay." She led him to an empty booth, brought him a chilled drink, and sat across from him. Watching him open his sketch pad was like watching a memory reawaken in real time. As he drew, Jaden looked up and tilted his head curiously. "You smell like my mom's scarf," he said, unfiltered. "It's old now, but I sleep with it. It smells like flowers and soap." Freda blinked rapidly, struggling to keep her face calm. "That's a beautiful thing to remember," she managed to say. Jaden shrugged. "Sometimes I feel like I know you. Not from meeting you, but from something deeper." He pressed a crayon into the page. "Your eyes, they feel like home." Freda bit her lip to keep it from quivering. "You're very thoughtful for your age," she said, her voice husky. Jaden gave a little laugh. "Mom said I asked too many questions, but she liked that about me." He looked back at his drawing, then paused. "Why does it feel easy to talk to you?" Freda reached out, touching his hand instinctively before pulling back. Maybe we understand the same kind of quiet." Jaden tilted his head, eyes narrowed in wonder. "You say things like her too." Freda excused herself then, rushing to the staff room under the pretense of work, her chest rising too quickly. She closed the door behind her and pressed her back against it, breathless. "Angela," she whispered, "he knows. Even if he doesn't know how, he knows." That night, Francis walked past Jaden's room and noticed the soft flicker of his bedside lamp still glowing. He peeked in to see the boy awake, sprawled on his bed with a blanket around his shoulders, whispering quietly to himself. "Jaden," Francis stepped inside. "Why aren't you sleeping?" Jaden looked up, eyes a little glassy. "I keep hearing her voice in my dreams again." Francis sat on the edge of the bed, brushing the hair from his son's forehead. "Your mom's voice?" he asked. Jaden nodded slowly. "But not like before. It's softer now. Like she's far away, and sometimes someone else calls my name. I don't see her face. Just her voice through fog." Francis felt a cold ripple move through his spine. "What does she say?" he asked. Jaden hesitated, then whispered, "She just says my name, like she's scared I won't answer." Francis stayed silent, unsure of what to say. Jaden leaned into his side. "Daddy, is it weird that I feel calm when I talk to that hostess? Like I've known her forever?" Francis wrapped his arm around him. "No, son. It's not weird at all. Some connections don't need explanations. They're just there." Jaden yawned, then looked up. "If she knew Mommy, would she tell me? Would she want to?" Francis stared into the dim light for a long moment. Sometimes people carry stories in their hearts for a long time, afraid of what will happen if they tell them. But the truth finds its way out eventually. Jaden nodded, resting his head on Francis's lap. "I hope she tells me. I think she has something to say." Francis watched his son drift to sleep, heart aching with both fear and hope. He knew they were on the edge of something deeper, and it wouldn't be long before the voices from the past, Angela's, Freda's, even his own, would collide into one moment where the truth could no longer be silenced. Francis hadn't visited Angela's grave in almost a year. Not because he didn't care, but because every time he stood beside the cold marble, his guilt clawed deeper into his chest. He'd promised her a life of peace. Yet now, everything was shifting around secrets she never told. On a cloudy Sunday, with the city hushed by rain, he walked through the cemetery with an umbrella trembling slightly in his hand. He stood silently by her resting place, eyes scanning the name engraved in gold. Angela Peace Okoro, beloved wife and mother. For a long while, he said nothing. Then, slowly, his voice broke through the sound of falling rain. "Angela, what did you keep from me?" he whispered. "Did you ever plan to tell me? About her? About Jaden?" His hands clenched. "He sees her and says he feels you. What kind of bond is that, if not one that lives in blood?" He placed a small stone on the grave, a silent tradition of remembrance. His voice cracked again. "He's changing, Angela. He's curious. I can't lie to him if this thing is true." Francis closed his eyes. Memories of their last conversations rushed back, those quiet moments when she'd touch his cheek, her eyes filled with unspoken thoughts she never voiced. He always thought it was fear of dying. But maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the burden of a truth that wasn't hers alone. As he turned to leave, he stopped and said one more thing under his breath. "He's a good boy, so good. And if Freda really is his birth mother, I swear I'll protect him from confusion, from pain, even if it means confronting every shadow you tried to spare us from." When he got home, Jaden was asleep on the couch with his sketchbook resting against his chest. Francis sat beside him and looked at the latest drawing. It was Freda again, but this time she was holding hands with a shadowy figure of a boy. Beneath it, in Jaden's handwriting, were the words, "I don't know why I trust her, but I do." Jaden's 9th birthday arrived with quiet excitement. Francis had offered to throw a grand party, but Jaden insisted on something simple, just a few friends, cake, and his favorite peppered chicken wings. As they set up the backyard with balloons and foldable chairs, Francis asked gently, "Is there anyone else you'd like to invite?" Jaden hesitated, then bit his lip. Do you think the hostess from the restaurant could come?" Francis blinked, surprised, but he saw the longing in his son's eyes. "If it matters that much to you, I'll ask." He made the call that afternoon. Freda picked up after 3 rings. "Hi, it's Francis," he said. "I know this is unexpected, but tomorrow is Jaden's birthday. He asked if you could come. No pressure." On the other end, Freda was silent for a moment. "Then, if he wants me there, I'll come." Her voice was barely above a whisper. The next day, Freda arrived in a simple green dress and a soft head wrap. Jaden ran up to her and hugged her with the kind of trust that made her heart ache. "You came," he beamed. "You didn't even forget." She crouched and smiled through misty eyes. "Of course not. Thank you for inviting me." The guests mingled, unaware of the emotional undercurrent flowing through the garden. Peace, seated under a canopy, locked eyes with Freda from across the yard, and her face drained of color. She hadn't seen her youngest daughter in nearly 7 years. She stood slowly, walked over, and whispered harshly, "What are you doing here?" Freda turned to her and said quietly, "I came because he asked me to, not to cause trouble." Peace's gaze flicked to Jaden, who was laughing near the cake stand. "He doesn't know," she murmured. Freda's voice shook. "Not yet." Before Peace could respond, Francis approached them with a plate. "Everything all right here?" he asked carefully. Peace smiled tightly. "Yes, just catching up." But as Freda took the plate from him and glanced down at Jaden, her hands trembled. She knew this day would come, the moment where eyes, bloodlines, and silence collided. And now that it had, there was no going back. The day after the party, one of the parents shared a group photo online, a candid shot of the guests, Jaden holding his cake, and Freda beside him, laughing. It was innocent, warm, and far too revealing. Within hours, the picture made its way to Clara, an old friend of Angela's who had moved overseas. Clara messaged Francis immediately. "Is this who I think it is?" I remember Freda. She was troubled, but she adored Angela. Why is she with Jaden? Francis stared at the message, his pulse quickening. He clicked the photo again. It was the eyes, Jaden's eyes mirrored in Freda's smile. It was undeniable. Later that night, he pulled up an old yearbook and found another picture, Freda at 16, cheeks rounder, eyes defiant. But the resemblance was still there. It was her. It had always been her. Francis walked into Jaden's room that night and found him awake again, this time staring at the framed birthday photo he had printed out. She looks happy in it, Jaden said softly, like she belongs there. Francis sat beside him, weighing every word. Sometimes people reappear in our lives for a reason, he began, even when we thought their story had ended long ago. Jaden looked at him with sharp, searching eyes. She knew Mommy, didn't she? Francis nodded slowly. Yes, she did, Jaden whispered, but I think there's more. He placed his hand over the photo. I think I came from her. Francis swallowed hard, heartbreaking at the boy's quiet wisdom. We're going to find out the whole truth, Jaden, he said gently. No more half-stories. You deserve to know everything. Jaden leaned into him, his voice almost inaudible. Even if it hurts. Francis kissed his forehead. Even then, especially then. Francis hadn't opened the bottom drawer of Angela's old dresser since the week after her funeral. It still smelled faintly of her lavender lotion and old paper. On a restless evening when Jaden had gone to bed early, Francis found himself standing there, drawn by the weight of questions too long left unanswered. He unlocked the drawer and slowly pulled it open. Inside lay a small velvet box, the kind that once held jewelry but now contained folded letters, photographs, and a worn envelope with bold handwriting on the front. For the day the truth becomes necessary. His fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single page, Angela's neat cursive filling the margins with love and grief. If you are reading this, it means something I hoped would stay buried has found its way to the surface. Jaden is not mine by birth. He is Freda's son. She gave him to me when she couldn't raise him. I loved him as my own and always will. Please protect him from pain, but never from truth. Francis sat down slowly, the letter pressed against his chest. His eyes burned with tears that never fell. Everything finally aligned. Jaden's connection to Freda, Freda's nervous avoidance, Angela's quiet burdens. The woman he married had never lied, but she had chosen silence as her shield. Now Francis was the one left to carry the fallout. He reread the letter several times before folding it carefully and tucking it back inside the box, alongside the baby sock Angela had included. Then he reached for his phone and called Freda. She picked up on the second ring. Francis, her voice was cautious. He cleared his throat. I know. Angela told me. I found the letter. There was silence on the line. Then the sound of her breath hitching. I wanted to tell you, she said, but I didn't think I had the right. Francis's voice was quiet but firm. It's not about rights anymore, Freda. It's about responsibility. Jaden deserves to hear this, honestly, from someone who's lived it. From you. She whispered back, what if he hates me? Francis exhaled slowly. He's a child, Freda. He doesn't hate. But he'll feel confused if we don't give him clarity. And in that moment, both of them knew there was no turning back. Freda sat in her bedroom with the curtains drawn, the lights dim, and the letter Angela had written to her cradled in her lap. It was aged but perfectly intact, one of the few things she had touched more than she touched her own skin. The envelope, never opened until now, carried her name in Angela's handwriting. Inside, the words flowed like a gentle river, equal parts love and quiet confrontation. Freda, I never judged you. I just wanted to protect the part of you that was good, the part you gave me when you placed Jaden in my arms. I pray you return someday, not for me, but for him. You're still his mother, whether you feel worthy or not. Freda read the words aloud until her voice cracked. Why did you believe in me? She whispered. Even when I had nothing to give? The truth folded itself around her. Angela had always known this moment would come, had written not out of guilt, but from grace. Tears streamed down her face, unstoppable now. She clutched the letter as if holding Angela herself. You always knew I'd break down, she murmured. You knew I'd run, and you still asked me to come back for him. She stood, shaky but resolute, and walked to the mirror. Her reflection stared back, eyes swollen, mouth trembling, but for the first time in years, she didn't look away. She saw herself fully, flaws and all. Picking up her phone, she texted Francis. I want to talk to him. Not to explain, just to listen if he lets me. Within seconds, the reply came, tomorrow after school. He'll be waiting. Frida placed the letter into her bag carefully, not as a keepsake, but as a guide. This wasn't just about unveiling the past, it was about healing it, one honest word at a time. She wasn't sure if Jaden would understand. But she owed him a voice she'd stolen from his beginning. Tomorrow, that silence would end. Francis spent the morning pacing. Every few minutes, he checked the driveway, then Jaden's room, then the clock again. Peace had called the night before, having heard from Frida. She was unsure, even fearful, of how it would affect Jaden. He's still a child, she warned. Some truths are too heavy. But Francis had only replied, some silences are heavier. Now, he stood at the living room window as Jaden's school van pulled into the gate. The boy hopped out with his backpack swinging and his face bright, unaware of what waited inside. Hi, Dad, he chirped, dropping his bag and heading for the fridge. Francis called softly, Jaden, come here, please. There's someone waiting in the study. Jaden paused. Who? The lady from the restaurant, Francis said. She wants to talk to you. Jaden froze. Is something wrong? No, Francis said gently. She just wants to talk. And you deserve to hear what she has to say. Jaden entered the study slowly, heart thudding, and there she was, Frida, sitting upright, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She stood as he walked in, her voice soft. Hi again, Jaden. He looked at her, confused but calm. Why are you here? She swallowed hard. Because there's something important I need to tell you. And I didn't want you to hear it from anyone else. Jaden blinked. Is this about Mom? Frida nodded. In a way, yes. She reached into her bag and pulled out the letter from Angela, but didn't open it yet. Jaden, when you were born, your mom, Angela, was the one who raised you. She loved you more than anything, but she wasn't the one who gave birth to you. Jaden's eyes widened, breath-catching. What do you mean? Frida's voice trembled. I'm your birth mother. I had you when I was very young. I couldn't take care of you. So I gave you to the only person I knew would raise you right, my sister. The silence between them thickened, then Jaden whispered. So, your mom's sister, Frida nodded, eyes stinging. Yes, and I've never stopped thinking about you. Jaden didn't run, he didn't cry. He just stood there, breathing slowly as the world shifted beneath his feet. Frida barely made it out of the house before the weight of the moment crushed her. She stood beside Francis's garden fence, hands gripping the iron rails as her breath came in broken waves. Inside that study, she had finally voiced the truth that had lived inside her like a sealed room, and now that the door was open, she couldn't stop trembling. Her knees buckled, and she slid down to the grass, burying her face in her palms. I waited too long, she whispered through her tears. I stole the one thing a child should never be confused about, where he came from. Her sobs were guttural, loud, unfiltered. Francis, watching quietly from the porch, didn't interrupt. He let her grieve, knowing it wasn't a breakdown, it was an unraveling. A release she'd been holding in for nearly a decade. He didn't cry, she said when Francis approached gently. He didn't scream or run. He just stood there and looked at me, like I broke something he hadn't even realized was fragile. Francis knelt beside her, his voice steady. He's quiet when things hit too deep. It's how he processes pain. Frida wiped her cheeks, mascara streaked down her face. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? Francis didn't rush his answer. He doesn't understand it fully yet. But he's not angry. He's overwhelmed. That boy has the kindest heart I've ever seen, just like Angela. But this is going to take time. Frida sniffed, nodding slowly. I never planned to come back into his life. But then I saw his eyes, and I couldn't breathe. He looked like me and Angela, all at once. And I wanted to vanish again, but he kept pulling me in. Francis placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maybe this isn't about being ready anymore. Maybe this is just about being present, even in the mess. She gave a bitter chuckle. The mess is all I've ever been good at. Francis looked at her, firm but kind. Angela trusted you. She left that letter for you. So if she believed you still had something good to give, then I think you do too. For the first time in years, Frida didn't push that belief away. Jaden didn't speak much after Frida left that day. He sat on his bed for hours, tracing the corners of the drawing he'd made of her weeks earlier. Her face, her eyes, the softness in her voice. The dots were slowly connecting in his young mind, but even as truth settled in, it didn't bring clarity. Only questions. That evening after dinner, he walked into the living room where Frances sat reading. "Dad?" he said softly. Frances looked up. "Yes, buddy?" Jaden bit his lip, struggling. "When she said she's my real mom. Does that mean Mommy Angela wasn't?" Frances closed the book and set it aside. "Angela didn't carry you in her belly, Jaden, but she carried you every single day of your life with love that never wavered. She was your mother in every way that mattered." Jaden nodded slowly. "So, who am I really?" Frances reached out and pulled him into his lap. "You're Jaden. You're smart, kind, and brave. And the love that made you came from more than one woman. That's not a bad thing." Jaden stared at the floor. "She looked scared when she told me. Like she thought I would hate her." Frances stroked his hair. "She's afraid because she's lived with this secret a long time. And sometimes shame makes people hide. But she came forward because she wants you to know the truth. That means something." Jaden sat up straight, eyes searching. "Is she going to disappear again?" Frances shook his head. "Not if you don't want her to." There was silence, then Jaden whispered, "I want to know her, but I don't want to forget Mom either." Frances smiled softly. "You don't have to choose. Angela would want you to open your heart, not close it." Jaden leaned against him, eyes distant but calm. "Okay," he said, "then I'll try, but I'm scared too." Frances hugged him tighter. "That's brave, son. Being scared and still showing up, that's the bravest thing you can do." Even though Jaden had already accepted much of the truth emotionally, Frances believed a DNA test would give everyone closure. A confirmation not just for legal clarity, but for emotional healing. "It's not to question anything," he told Freda over the phone. "It's just, when Jaden asks later in life, I want him to have something factual to hold on to." Freda agreed, her voice steady for once. "Then let's do it. I won't run from this anymore." The next morning, they visited a private clinic. Jaden clutched Frances's hand as the nurse prepared the swab. "Will it hurt?" he asked. "Just a tickle in your cheek," Frances said, kneeling beside him. Freda stood on the other side of the room, quiet but visibly tense. When it was her turn, she hesitated only briefly before stepping forward. She wanted to do this for Jaden. For herself. The swabs were sealed, labeled, and sent away. "We'll get results in 3 days," the technician said. Freda nodded, but her thoughts were racing ahead of time. Later that evening, they sat together on a bench outside the clinic. Freda glanced sideways at Jaden, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she managed. Jaden looked up. "For what?" "For being braver than I was," she whispered. "You're stronger than you know." Jaden kicked at a pebble on the pavement. "I don't feel strong. I just don't want to be confused anymore." Freda nodded slowly. "Me too." After a pause, Jaden asked, "If the test says it's true, does that change anything?" Freda hesitated. "Only if you want it to." "I'll follow your lead, Jaden. I'm not here to take anything away from you." He looked down at his hands. "I don't know what to do with 2 moms." Freda smiled sadly. "Then don't think of it that way. Think of it like your heart just got more space to love." Jaden looked up, and for the first time, he gave her a full, lingering gaze. "Okay," he said quietly, "but please don't go away again." Freda's eyes glistened. "I'm not going anywhere. Not anymore." 3 days later, the clinic called with the results. Frances picked up the envelope alone, wanting to absorb the truth before facing either Freda or Jaden. He sat in his car for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. The words were plain and clinical. 99.99% probability of maternity. Freda Okoro. There it was, printed in black and white, confirmation of what everyone now emotionally knew. He leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. The truth hadn't shattered anything, but it had reshaped everything. Later that afternoon, he gathered both Freda and Jaden in the living room. Jaden sat on the couch between them, quiet but alert. Frances unfolded the paper and handed it to him. "This says that you and Freda share something unique, your DNA. It confirms that she gave birth to you. But it doesn't change who raised you or how much you've been loved." Jaden read the document carefully, even though he didn't understand every word. Then he passed it back and looked at Freda. So, it's really true, Freda nodded. Yes. Her voice was steady, though her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. But the truth doesn't mean you owe me anything. I gave you up because I believed someone else could give you what I couldn't. And I wasn't wrong. Jaden blinked slowly. You didn't even try to take me back. It wasn't said with anger, just quiet confusion. Freda inhaled deeply. I didn't think I deserved to. A pause stretched between them until Jaden said softly, I don't know how to call you. You're not Mom, not like that. But I feel something when I see you. Freda reached over slowly and touched his hand. You don't have to call me anything yet. Just let me be near for now. That's enough. Jaden gave the slightest nod. Okay, but I want to keep knowing you. Francis, standing in the corner, exhaled because somehow, between one truth and another, a door had quietly opened. The days that followed were quiet, but healing. Jaden began asking Freda simple questions, his favorite meal, the color he used to cry to as a baby, the first book he ever liked. Was I loud? He asked once as they shared ice cream at a roadside cafe. Freda chuckled. You screamed at the top of your lungs when you were hungry. Angela used to pace with you across the room, whispering, Your lungs are proof of life, little warrior. Jaden smiled faintly. She always made up stories about me. Said I used to kick in my sleep like I was fighting dreams. Freda looked away briefly, blinking back tears. You still do. That night I saw you in the restaurant. I knew before I even understood why. You stretched like your foot remembered a crib. Jaden listened quietly, then asked, Why did you call me Jaden? Or was that her idea? Freda smiled. That was me. It means thankful in Hebrew. Angela kept it. She said you were already claimed by grace. Freda didn't rush to define their relationship. She didn't insist on being called Mom. She was just there, walking beside him when he came out of school, joining him and Francis for movies on weekends, slipping small notes in his backpack like, I liked the bird you drew yesterday. One Saturday, Jaden looked up during a walk through the park and said, Can I call you Auntie Freda? I know it's not everything, but it's something. Freda smiled so wide it almost hurt. It's more than something, she whispered. It's a beginning. Peace, watching all of this unfold quietly from her place in the background, finally visited Francis one evening. You did the right thing, she said simply, even when I was too afraid to say it aloud. Francis handed her a cup of tea. Angela did the hardest part. She loved without borders. Now we're just learning to do the same. As the sun dipped behind the clouds, a strange but welcome calm filled the air. They were building something new, not to replace what was lost, but to honor it with truth. Francis returned to Angela's grave alone, this time not in anguish, but in clarity. He carried with him a worn envelope, her letter to Freda, and a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite. The cemetery was quiet, touched by a gentle wind that rustled the leaves like whispered memories. He knelt beside the headstone and placed the flowers down slowly. Angela, he said aloud, voice steady. The letter worked. She came back, not perfect, but willing. And Jaden, he's okay. Confused, but not broken. He paused, hands resting on his knees. I've asked myself over and over if you hid the truth out of fear. But now I know it wasn't fear. It was protection. You didn't want him growing up with pieces he didn't know how to put together. And now that he's old enough, you gave us the map. Thank you for trusting us with the truth on your own time. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, a new one. It showed Jaden sitting between Francis and Freda on the front porch, all three smiling, the boy holding a drawing in his lap. Francis placed it at the base of the stone. He's not choosing between mothers, he said quietly. He's learning he was never without one. Just surrounded differently. His voice wavered slightly. You were the center of our world. And now, somehow, you've made space for us to find peace in your absence. The wind picked up gently, as if affirming his words. He stood, brushing the dirt off his trousers. You'd be proud of him, he whispered. He's more like you than you'd believe, quiet strength wrapped in a gentle heart. He touched the stone one last time, then turned to leave, his steps lighter than they had been in years. He hadn't said goodbye, he'd said thank you. And in that, something finally let go. Jaden sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, surrounded by art supplies and cutouts. His little fingers moved with quiet purpose as he carefully inserted 2 photographs into a handmade frame. One of Angela, holding him as a toddler with that ever-gentle gaze. The other, a recent one of Freda, laughing mid-sentence, her eyes crinkled at the edges like she was finally letting light in. He pressed the frame together and tightened the backing. On the bottom edge, he wrote in marker, "The woman who raised me, the woman who birthed me, both gave me love." Francis walked in and paused at the door, watching. "That's a nice frame," he said softly. Jaden looked up and nodded. "I wanted both of them on my desk. That way, when I'm thinking, I don't forget where I came from or who stood by me." Francis knelt beside him. "You've grown a lot this year, Jay." Jaden smiled faintly. "It's like I didn't know I was missing a piece, until I found it." He placed the frame next to his books, adjusting it until it sat just right. "I used to feel scared when I had questions about Mom," he said. "Like asking meant I was forgetting her. But now I know she left me with more than memories. She gave me both her love and someone else's." Francis nodded, brushing his hand gently across Jaden's back. Angela always knew love wasn't about possession, it was about giving fully, even when it hurt. Jaden glanced back at the frame. "I think she knew I'd ask one day, and she made sure I wouldn't be alone when I did." A short silence passed between them, not heavy, but peaceful. Jaden added, "Sometimes I still cry when I remember her, but I don't feel empty anymore." Francis swallowed hard and hugged him tightly. "Crying doesn't mean you're weak. It means she mattered, and you carry her with you every step of the way." Jaden leaned into the embrace, whispering, "I think she'd like that I have both them now." Francis held him close. She'd be proud, so proud. It was a Sunday afternoon when Jaden asked to visit the park, the same one where Angela used to take him to feed the ducks, and where Francis later proposed to her. This time, Freda joined them. She wore a soft yellow blouse and a floral skirt, her hair braided down her back, her steps unsure but hopeful. Jaden carried his sketch pad under one arm and his water bottle in the other. They walked for a while in easy silence, the air warm and sweet with the scent of blooming ixora. At one point, Jaden stopped by a bench shaded by a jacaranda tree and turned to Freda. "Can I draw you again?" she smiled. "Only if you promise not to give me another squiggly nose." He grinned. No promises. As he sketched, she watched him, marveling at the steady focus, the quiet joy he poured into every line. When he finished, he held it up. "This time I drew us together." She took the paper and blinked back tears. "It's beautiful." Jaden looked at her for a long moment. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Anything." He stood and took a tentative step closer. "Would it be okay if I called you Mom sometimes?" Freda froze, her lips parting slightly, but her breath caught in her throat. "Only if you really want to," she whispered, her voice cracking. Jaden shrugged gently. "I think I have space in my heart for two. You don't have to be the same kind of mom. Just be here." Freda knelt, arms open but waiting. Jaden didn't hesitate. He stepped into her embrace and wrapped his arms tightly around her waist. "I'm here," she whispered into his ear, "and I won't disappear again." Francis, watching from a short distance, placed his hands in his pockets and let the wind wash over him. In that moment, the past didn't matter. What mattered was that healing had finally chosen a home. Jaden, held in the arms of the woman who once let him go, whispered back, "I believe you, Mom." And the world, once broken in silent pieces, felt whole again. Here's the Bible verse, Isaiah 61, verse 3. "To bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair." Moral of the story: truth may wound, but silence imprisons. Only when we face our past with courage and grace can healing truly begin. Love is not limited by titles. It is proven through presence, sacrifice, and the choice to stay. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for